The topic of this presentation is the effects of labeling on achievement. Research was conducted to find studies that would relate to the following statement. Research shows that there is a strong correlation between positive or negative labeling and the corresponding effects on an individual's ability or inability to achieve one's goals. One article examined which related to the thesis was titled Prejudice, Stereotypes, and Labeling Effects, Sources of Bias in Person Perception. This article discussed 3 experiments relating to how group labels bias person perception. The first experiment used an affective model, which assumed that how much people like different groups determined bias. The second experiment used a cognitive model, which assumed that a person's beliefs regarding different groups determined bias. The third experiment used a combined model, which assumed that affect and cognition are used to determine bias. In Scenario 1, behavior samples were evaluated for targets labeled as either rock music performers or child abusers. Scenario 2 evaluated behavior samples of targets labeled homosexual or heterosexual. In all scenarios or studies, controlling for liking eliminated bias. In Scenario 2, controlling for beliefs about the groups eliminated bias. Overall, these studies suggested an important role for affect in judgmental biases. The next article is related to labeling and self-esteem. The author examines how labeling exceptional students impacts their self-esteem. According to Thompson, schools and educational systems create and maintain environments that promote labeling in relation to disability. Schooling then becomes a force which impedes intellectual and social growth for the labeled student. Self-esteem is most often lowered by failure, criticism, rejection, and other events that have negative relational value. High self-esteem is associated with believing that one possesses socially desirable attributes such as academic or social competence, personal likability, or success. Labels are harmful when they result in an individual being degraded, discriminated against, excluded from society, or placed in classrooms without regard to their individuality, which often occur with children labeled with exceptionalities. Labels, however, may be helpful by providing a common language to describe a disability and by allowing children to get treatment and educational assistance. In short, Thompson found that not all labels are bad or good, but the key is in how they are. The authors cited guidelines for parents and educators in promoting positive self-esteem of exceptional students, which would be beneficial for all adults to keep in mind when interacting with children. The guidelines are to value each child as an individual with unique strengths, needs, interests, and abilities, to focus on the child's strengths and talents and abilities, to reject the child's behavior but don't reject the child, to help the child develop decision-making and problem-solving skills, to divide large tasks into smaller, manageable ones to ensure success, mastery, and retention, to communicate confidence in the child, and to emphasize positive aspects of behavior and performance even if the task is not completely successful. This next article examines and discusses how and why a teacher may label a child as a problem child. This study examined 2,340 students in the Netherlands. They looked at relative achievement with relation to being labeled a problem child. The result of the study was that the labeling of problem students is based on the relative achievements and relative behavior of students, and referral to special education can also be predicted on the basis of relative achievement. This means that if a student is in a high-achieving class, they may be considered a problem student, even though they may be at the top or within the average of another different level achieving class. In addition to lower relative achievements, the children that the teachers described as problem children had lower socioeconomic status and came more often from abroad or had parents who were not native speakers. Only 17% of the teachers in the study labeled no students as problematic. The remaining 83% of teachers labeled at least one student as problematic, 4% of them labeling more than 7 students as problematic. Each of the studies previously described play a very important role in supporting the thesis statement. Though none of the studies gave a direct correlation of labeling to achieving one's goals, they all illustrate different ways in which a label may affect an individual's ability to achieve. The first study concluded that one's behavior may be positively or negatively judged based on a bias relating to whether they are liked or how their beliefs compare with others. The second study illustrated that labeling children with exceptionalities may lead to lower self-esteem. The third study concluded that many teachers label children as problematic based on a comparison to other students, which may affect the amount of one-on-one attention that students receive from the teacher. A negative bias, low self-esteem, and less individual help from a teacher were all outcomes of labeling through the studies. Each of these may lead to lower achievement or increased obstacles to achieving one's goals. A negative bias affects how others perceive a person, which may lead them to treat an individual in a negative manner. A low self-esteem can make a person lack the drive to accomplish, as they may feel worthless or inadequate. Less help from a teacher may affect a child's academic achievement, especially one who is not achieving as high as their peers. Based on this research and the previous knowledge, it is important to look at the whole person and to think before we place a label or stereotype on another person, as it may negatively affect their life currently or in